Hey, and welcome to Board with Life News for August 16th, brought to you by Holy Grail Games. Today I'm going to talk to you about Passing Through Petra, Keyforge, Discover Lands Unknown, Dune, The Dark Tower, and the Kickstarter for Liberation. Let's get to it. First off, I shaved my beard. I know, I'm aware of it. I know it looks weird, and it's not good, but that's fine. Everything doesn't have to be good in life. I did it because I was done with Gen Con, and I had a couple months before I needed to look like myself in order for people to recognize me at conventions, so there you go. Okay, into the board games. Passing Through Petra was announced from Renegade Games. This is designed by J. Alex Kevern, who he designed Gold West, Sentient, a bunch of other games. If you follow this, you know that I'm a big fan of his designs. He does kind of light midweight Euro games. In this, you play... You're a merchant passing through Petra, which I guess was a famous like cliff system, I guess, gorge that you'd go through. I don't know if they call it gorges there. That might just be a Texas thing. Anyways, but it looks like it has this interesting tile pushing mechanic where there's like these plastic walls on either side, and you push your tiles through as the caravans move between the two stone walls and stuff like that. So it seems interesting and clever, and I really like tail end games, and this seems like it's got some unique stuff to it, so I'm excited about it. Fantasy Flight announced Keyforge at Gen Con this year. This is designed by Richard Garfield, who is, of course, the father of CCGs. He designed Magic the Gathering and Netrunner. And this game is weird. You've probably heard about it already because the news came out like 2 weeks ago. It's going to be the first unique game in Fantasy Flight's new line of unique games. It is a lot like a collectible card game that you'd expect, except there's absolutely no deck building. You don't construct your decks like you do in Magic or any normal CCG. You open a deck, and a pre-made deck, every single pre-made deck you buy is 100% unique. There's not another one like it in the world, and then you just play with that deck. You can't swap the cards out or anything like that. So you just open it and then figure out how to use the cards you're given. So it's obviously a crazy thing from a production standpoint to somehow be able to put all these together and make so many combinations, but somehow they still work. Like the algorithm there seems interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see kind of how this is received, because like part of CCGs, the thing in CCGs I like is building my deck. This might scratch some of the same kind of like itch without any of the like huge cost commitment or time commitment, but then at the same time, like I think I'm gonna want to like open a bunch of decks and play with a bunch of different decks. I have no idea what the tournament scene is going to be like, because inherently some decks will just be better than others no matter how good the algorithm is. So I don't know if it's a thing where like I play with my deck and you play with your deck and then we swap, and then I play with your deck, you play with my... I don't know. But it is interesting, and some of the gameplay mechanics are actually seem really interesting. There's no like mana cost to play creatures or anything like that. But in order to like activate the creature, you have to play a creature of the same type, which is pretty cool. I know it's got some adjacency stuff going on. I haven't played it yet. It seems both innovative in obviously the unique game approach, but also in the kind of gameplay mechanics approach. So I'm excited about it. Fantasy Flight then announced Discover Lands Unknown, which is going to be the second unique game in this line of unique games. It's an exploration game where every single box will have different components, different tiles, different stuff. Again, will be 100% unique to you. So if you play your friend's game, it is a different game, basically. Little things will be different about the game. This, I'm not as excited about as Keyforge. It seems like a fun idea, but it also seems very much like a gimmick in this, because what I want from a board game is like a well-made, curated, balanced experience, right? Like I want the designer to kind of be able to, or publisher or whatever, to give me the game they intend. And this, it's like, I don't care if that game, someone else across the country also has that experience. Like the fact that there is a different experience in this doesn't interest me at all. I feel like games like Time Stories kind of do this, where you get to explore a thing and then, you know, continue and do that over and over, but in a better way. And also, like, this kind of is like a legacy... It's not a legacy game at all, obviously, but like the uniqueness that we get out of legacy games, but it's minus some of the fun of building it myself. I don't know. I have no idea how it will work out. This is one of those situations where it's like, I don't know why board games are trying to do it when video games are so much more able to do this. I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see how this one's received. Gale Force 9 acquired the rights to Dune, the Frank Herbert and his sons, I don't remember his sons' names, that entire world series of books. Of course, there is the classic board game Dune from 1979 that is one of the biggest Grail games. People have wanted that to get reprinted forever, and so everybody was like, oh, does this mean we're going to get that one? And it doesn't sound like it means that we're going to get a reprint of that, because in the press release they say producing original tabletop games, which I assume means new tabletop games. They're going to be making multiple games. Some of them will be directly tied into the new Dune movie that's coming out in a year or two. So it's a cool world, and Gale Force 9 sometimes puts out really good games, sometimes, so maybe they'll be good. Restoration Games announced Return to Dark Tower. This is obviously a restoration of Dark Tower, the game from the early 80s that had a big central plastic tower that had like computer chips in it, and there was like programming with computers where it would like calculate all of the stuff for the game and play music and stuff. It was like a crazy thing when it came out in the early 80s, obviously because computers were barely out in the early 80s in homes and stuff. So Restoration Games picking this up makes a lot of sense for them. They had huge success with like redoing Fireball Island, so this seems like kind of the same type of thing. I remember seeing the Dark Tower game at a comic book shop when I was a kid and just like wanting it so bad and thinking it was so awesome. I think it might have cost like $100. I could be wrong. I was like 6, so maybe my perception of money is off. But being like, whoa, a game that costs $100, that's crazy. Haha, how naive. The thing that most excites me about this is, in addition to Rob Daviau, who does all of the Restoration Games stuff, they've signed Isaac Childress on to co-design with him. And Isaac Childress did Gloomhaven, which was an awesome, expansive game with a really good story, all that kind of stuff. So I'm very interested to see what Isaac Childress is going to bring to the table on this one. This week's Kickstarter is for Liberation. Liberation is a 2-player asymmetrical game where one player takes on the role of the Dynasty and they're trying to expand their web of influence and power. One player takes on the role of the Liberation and they're trying to sabotage the Dynasty from their secret base. It uses this cool kind of randomly generated map where you've got 4 cards that you can shuffle and turn and flip over however you want. So each game has a different little map, which is really creative. Button Shy Games, is being produced by Button Shy Games, is kind of really pushing the bounds at kind of what kind of designs and how much of a game you can get into just 18 cards. And this seems to continue in their tradition of that, that they are very well known and very well liked for. So it seems like a totally interesting kind of new take on the 18 card game. It is $10 right now on Kickstarter, so if that's interesting to you, go back that. Alright, that's the news for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Make sure you follow me on social media. I'm at Chris Bryan Games on Instagram and Facebook. And make sure you check out my Patreon, linked below, because I love money. It's my favorite thing in the whole world. That's not true, but it's good. I like it. I don't dislike it. This week's question comes from at Carl E. Robinson via Twitter, and they ask, how stable is your process of inspiration, development, completion of ideas? Do you find you have lots of ideas that don't reach fruition, or do you commit strongly to developing them? So this is in regards to my game design stuff. I wouldn't say I commit strongly to developing ideas. I have probably maybe only 25% of my ideas, like things I write down in my notebooks, ever wind up even getting playtested at all or made at all. And then once I do a super rough, quick, dirty playtest of them by myself, I'm happy to, if they're not working how I thought they were, or I can't see where the fun would be, I'm happy to put them aside. Oftentimes I'll put them aside and then a year later it'll click and I'll think about it and I'll return to it, but I never like force a game. If my idea's not working, I'm never like grinding on and forcing on it. The only exception is when I take on work, like freelance work, like when I did the Dragon Ball Z game, I couldn't not do it, right? I've like signed a contract, I will give you a game, I have to do that. But even that, my first design idea that I prototyped didn't work at all, so I scrapped it and went at it from a different angle. So yeah, I don't. There are a couple of ideas I've had that I can tell there's some sort of good game in there somewhere, but I can't find it. But in that case, I just put them on the shelf, and then I'll return to them maybe a year later with fresh eyes and see what I can do. So yeah, when I'm developing stuff, it has to pretty quickly be a little bit interesting or a little bit fun, or I can feel like there are hooks in there that I can pull on. If something just doesn't work, I have no problem either scrapping it entirely or just putting it on the shelf and maybe returning to it later. Even with those, oftentimes there's little mechanics or little bits of those games that I then will like pull, I'll be like, that was cool. Like the game didn't work, I didn't like the game, but like that little bit, like that first player selection or whatever it is, that was cool, and I'll put it in another game. So I never feel like it's like a complete loss. Yeah, so great question. There were a lot of good questions this week. Thanks for it, and I'll see you next week.